Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Maybe because she wasn't supposed to be there at all. Maybe because, on paper, she was just a clerk, a logistical misfit misplaced in the heart of war. But Anna Vyulov knew better. And though she kept her posture calm, her silence measured, her eyes were already charting survival where others only saw plans. Colonel Marcus Thorne had barked the order earlier that day, his voice cutting through the tactical operations center like the edge of a steel blade. Take her off the mission. The words hung there, heavy, final, like the slam of a gavel in a courtroom. To him she was an inconvenience, a misplaced name on a roster. A warrant officer from logistics shuffled forward into a fight that demanded warriors, not paper pushers. He dismissed her presence with the same irritation a man swats at a fly. But he never looked at her face. He never saw the still fire in her eyes. Hours before that moment, Anna had stepped off a C-130 transport into the choking dust and heat of Fob Manticore. Alone. No fanfare, no welcome. Just a body from the rear. A woman in her late 30s with clean fatigues, an unimpressive rank stitched onto her chest, and a duffel bag slung casually over one shoulder. To the men already hardened by sun and battle, she was invisible, forgettable. Another faceless replacement drifting through the endless churn of the war machine. But Anna did not move like a clerk. Her boots fell deliberately, her pace steady, unhurried. She saw everything. The gaps between the HESCO barriers, the blind spots in the watchtowers, the wear on the tires of armored patrol vehicles. She read the desert wind by the way it pushed pale dust across the tarmac. Her eyes, cold and calculating, processed this world as if it were second nature, because it was. She didn't marvel at the scene like a tourist. She assessed it, memorized it, cataloged it. And she did it without ever betraying what she was. In the mess hall that night, the air thick with stew and sweat, she claimed a seat in the far corner with her back to the wall. Habit. Not a conscious choice, just muscle memory from years lived at the edges of danger. She ate methodically, her focus absolute, while her eyes slid across the room to Alpha Team. The men everyone whispered about. The ones chosen for the mission no one dared to doubt. Their confidence was magnetic, their bravado thick in the air. Lieutenant Garrett, their leader, filled the space with booming laughter, leaning back as if the world belonged to him. His men mirrored his energy, bold, cocky, unshakable. But Anna saw what others didn't. She saw the tension hidden in the jaw of the young radio operator, the restless flexing of the breacher's hands. She smelled the arrogance in the room, a sharp perfume that always masked fragility. She felt no envy, no awe, only a weary, bone-deep understanding of how thin the line between life and death really was. She had been here before. She knew how predators convinced themselves they could not bleed. Later, in front of the glowing satellite map pinned to the wall, her gaze lingered on the red circle marking the suspected compound. The official plan was elegant, fast, aggressive. A valley approach, speed under cover of darkness. On paper it was beautiful. To Anna it was a funnel, a trap. Her mind spun through contingencies, calculating risks, and she felt the familiar cold weight settle in her stomach. She stayed silent. She was a ghost at a feast she had not been invited to. Then came the summons. Colonel Thorne's office was sterile, pristine, and cold, an island of order in the chaos outside. The colonel himself stood stiff as iron behind his polished desk, eyes sharp and unyielding. He didn't ask her to sit. He didn't need to. He had already decided what she was. "There's a mistake in your assignment," he said, voice clipped. He tapped a thin folder against his palm, the story of her life reduced to pages and ink. He saw the gaps in her record, the desk postings, the commendations for inventory management. He saw nothing of who she was. He saw a file, not a human being. Anna stood calm, hands clasped behind her back, gaze level. "No mistake, Colonel," she answered, voice steady, almost serene. "My orders are to report here for logistical support duties." Her calmness only irritated him. He laughed without humor. "This is Fob Manticore. We're on the verge of Operation Serpent's Tooth. I need warriors, pilots, intel officers, not supply clerks." He dropped the file onto the desk with a sharp slap. "You are not qualified to be here." Inside, she felt nothing new, just the same cold wall of assumption she had met countless times before. Men who looked at her gender, her rank, her file, and decided she was nothing. She had long ago stopped arguing. The proof was never in the protest. It was always in the action. "The army sent me here, sir," she said simply. "That's all I know." He saw defiance where there was only discipline. His jaw hardened. "Captain Rostova," he barked to his aide by the door. "Get her on the next transport back to Kandahar. I don't care if it's supply, medevac, or mail. Take her off the mission." Anna gave no reaction. "Understood, sir." She turned crisply, left the office, and stepped once again into the desert heat. To the colonel, she was already gone, dismissed, forgotten. To Anna, it was merely confirmation of what she had always known, her place in the shadows. But invisibility was a weapon she knew how to use. She didn't pack her bags, not yet. Instead, she moved quietly through the base, unseen, unnoticed. In the motor pool, she pretended to audit vehicle logs while listening to the mechanics complain about terrain and breakdowns. She learned which trucks could run, which couldn't, and which wouldn't scream military from a mile away. A stripped-down civilian pickup, modified by engineers, caught her eye. Fast, agile, quiet. She tucked that knowledge away. In the comms tent, she buried herself in tedious inventory work no one else wanted. While she typed out numbers and serial codes, she listened. She listened to chatter, to the background hum of the digital battlefield. She slipped into Alpha Team's encrypted frequencies, studied the mission briefing packet in full, and what she saw there chilled her. The plan was bold but blind. The target, Zaid al-Hamri, the ghost, had evaded capture for years. He lived like smoke, always slipping through fingers. And these men, cocky, certain, were about to charge into his fortress through the most predictable path, a plan written to fail. That night she lingered in the shadows of the TOC while Garrett gave his final rallying speech to his men. "We go in hard, we go in fast, we are the storm," he declared. His words were met with silent, grim nods. They were ready to walk into the jaws of death. They didn't even see it. Anna did, and the cold certainty settled in her chest like stone. When the mission launched at 200, the desert sky was black velvet scattered with distant stars. In the command center, tension buzzed like electricity. The drones showed the compound, quiet and still. Garrett's voice on the radio was confident, calm. The men fast-roped down into the dust, their silhouettes disappearing into the dark. All was going as planned. Anna was not in the TOC. She was in her barracks, fully dressed, sitting in the dark, beside her duffel bag. But inside it wasn't uniforms and toiletries. It was a rifle, a plate carrier, medical gear, magazines of ammunition, and a radio tuned to Alpha's channel. She listened as the storm gathered. She closed her eyes and saw the trap already closing. It happened. First the drone feed flickered, then it died. Static filled the airwaves. Alpha's voices cut through in broken bursts, panic, gunfire, chaos. "They were waiting for us, multiple contacts, elevated positions." Garrett's voice, stripped of bravado, cracked with urgency. "We have men down," then static again. The TOC spiraled into confusion. Colonel Thorne barked orders, fists slamming against consoles. "Scramble the QRF. Get eyes on target." Blind rage, blind desperation. But Anna Vyulov, she simply stood. Quiet, methodical, her decision had already been made. She assembled her rifle with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. Every motion final, every click of metal a vow. She strapped on her plate carrier, holstered her sidearm, and walked into the chaos of the base. Soldiers ran in every direction, alarms blaring, the night filled with panic. She was just another shadow moving among them. No one noticed when she stepped into the motor pool. No one stopped her when she walked straight to that stripped-down civilian truck. She demanded the keys. The young mechanic hesitated, but one look into her eyes and the strength of her silence was enough. He handed them over. At the gate, two nervous privates blocked her path. "Lockdown, ma'am, no one in or out." Their rifles shook as they spoke. Anna didn't argue, she didn't shout, she simply looked at them, silent, steady. And something in that silence, something older, heavier than their orders, broke their resolve. They opened the gate. And she drove out into the night. Alone, toward the silence where 12 men had disappeared, toward the trap no one else had seen. Back in the TOC, a single icon appeared on the tactical map, a vehicle moving away from the base. Thorne demanded answers. Rostova whispered the words that silenced the room. "It's Vyulov." The base watched in disbelief as her icon traced not the planned route, but a hidden path through a dry riverbed no one had charted. A path only someone with instincts honed in shadows could know. And the question began to settle over the men and women staring at that tiny blue dot crawling toward the darkness. Who was she, really? They had dismissed her as a clerk. They were about to learn the truth. Why hadn't she turned back when the first shots crackled through the night? Most would have, most should have. But Anna Vyulov drove deeper into the desert, headlights off, tires whispering over the dust of an old riverbed no satellite had ever bothered to chart. Alone, calm, purposeful, a single blue transponder blinking on the map back at the base, the only movement in a world gone silent. Colonel Thorne raged, his voice echoing through the TOC like gunfire. Order her back, now. But the radios carried nothing but silence. His anger was volcanic, uncomprehending. A supply clerk had disobeyed him, had stolen a truck, and was driving into the same trap that had swallowed Alpha Team whole. He saw insubordination. He saw recklessness. He couldn't yet see the truth. Captain Rostova watched the screen, her sharp mind catching details Thorne missed. The path Anna traced wasn't random. It was deliberate. She was hugging the shadow of a ridge line, slipping through terrain no convoy could manage but perfect for one vehicle. Perfect for a ghost. Rostova didn't say it aloud, but a question whispered at the edge of her thoughts. How could someone new to this base know this land so well? The truck rolled to a stop at last, hidden between jagged rocks, invisible from the sky. Then the transponder split. A single blue dot blinked to life, her personal beacon. On foot now. Moving east toward the kill zone, toward the place where the desert still echoed with gunfire and men's last breaths. In the TOC, silence fell. They watched the dot advance at a steady, unhurried pace. Not panic, not desperation. Relentless, measured like a predator closing in. The air was metallic, sharp with cordite and the copper sting of blood. Anna crested a rise, crouched low, her rifle tucked close. The scene below unfolded like a nightmare painted in firelight. One Alpha Team vehicle overturned and burning, flames licking the night while the second sat crippled, riddled with holes. Shadows of men, her men, though none of them knew it yet, huddled behind the wreckage, pinned and bleeding. But Anna's eyes weren't drawn first to them. She scanned the high ground. She felt it before she saw it, the subtle glint of glass, a reflection that didn't belong, a sniper, East Ridge. 100 meters out, she steadied her breath. Time slowed, heartbeat by heartbeat, the world shrank to crosshairs, to a squeeze, to a soft, suppressed thump. A body slumped. Another nest, 50 meters left. Another thump. Silence. The hunters didn't even know they had been hunted. Then she moved, gliding down into the valley. No sound betrayed her. The wounded men noticed only when she was upon them. Weapons jerked up, barrels flashing in the firelight. "Hold," she said, voice low, calm, unshaken. And just like that, she wasn't a stranger anymore. She was command. Lieutenant Garrett blinked, stunned, his face pale, his thigh crudely bandaged. "Vyulov, what the hell are you?" "Status." Her interruption was clipped, merciless. No time for rank, no time for shock. Already her hands were cutting through gear, exposing a sucking chest wound on one soldier. Gauze, seal, morphine. Her movements were clean, practiced, faster than his thoughts. Garrett stammered. "Ambush, they knew our route. Heavy machine guns, RPGs, comms jammed instantly." He swallowed, shame tightening his throat. "Intel was wrong. He wasn't at the compound. It was a decoy. He's in the mountains, a bunker system. We never saw it coming." Anna's eyes flicked up only once, toward those dark cliffs looming above them. The real fight waited there. She handed Garrett a beacon. "QRF will come to this signal. Prepare your men for evac." Garrett stared at her, speechless. He saw the neutralized sniper nests. He saw his dying stabilized. He saw a clerk moving with the gravity of a phantom. "What about you?" he asked, voice raw. "Aren't you coming back with us?" Anna stood, rifle slung, eyes fixed on the cliffs. "The mission isn't complete." No hesitation, no explanation. And then she was gone, slipping into the shadows where even the night seemed afraid to follow. Back at the TOC, Garrett's voice crackled suddenly through a speaker. Weak, desperate, but alive. "Mayday, mayday, this is Alpha One. Immediate medical evacuation required." Chaos erupted. Relief, disbelief. Colonel Thorne lunged for the mic, barking orders, demanding answers. But it was Garrett's next words that froze the room. "We were saved," he said, breath shuddering, "by Warrant Officer Vyulov." The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Every pair of eyes turned to the map. Her icon was moving again, not toward safety, toward the mountains, toward the ghost himself. Thorne's face blanched. His mind couldn't reconcile it. The clerk he had dismissed, forgotten, was now finishing the mission his elite team had failed to complete. His fury fought with confusion. But Captain Rostova was already digging, her fingers flying across keys. She cross-referenced Anna's service number, digging deeper than standard clearance allowed. Then she saw it, her breath caught. "Sir," she whispered, "there's a restricted file, Special Operations Group. Call sign Kestrel." The name fell into the room like a stone into still water. Master Sergeant Miller, grizzled and scarred, lifted his head. His eyes widened. "Kestrel," his voice cracked on the word. He stepped forward, urgency in his limp. "Sir, with respect, you have no idea who you've sent out there." He told them a story, voice rough with memory. "Afghanistan. 9, we were cornered in the Korangal, a platoon about to be wiped out. No air support, no way out. Then 3 figures came down the mountain like shadows. They weren't ours, they weren't anyone. They dismantled the enemy in 10 minutes flat. One of them, a woman, the team leader. We only ever knew her call sign." Captain Rostova's screen confirmed it. Operation Nightfall. The Odessa Syndicate. Deep cover, declared MIA, presumed dead. Trauma buried under silence. A request for a desk. To disappear. Colonel Thorne's face drained of color. He had dismissed not a clerk, not a misfiled name. He had dismissed a legend. And now that legend was climbing into the mountains alone, chasing the ghost no one else could touch. The bunker was hidden behind scree and shadow, guarded by men who never even saw her pass. She didn't fight the guards. She didn't need to. She moved like water, silent, patient, finding the seams no one else knew existed. A ventilation shaft. A bypass over sensors. A corridor crossed by voices she slipped past without a sound. She wasn't invading. She was infiltrating. She was the virus inside the system. In the command hub, 3 men monitored screens with smug confidence. She didn't break down the door. She let gas slip through vents. Minutes later, they slumped over their consoles, asleep, unaware. She moved past, deeper, toward the heart. And there he was, Zaid al-Hamri, the ghost, sitting in a chamber carved from stone and lined with carpets, watching feeds of the world, sipping tea. He believed he was safe. He believed the trap had sprung and his enemies broken. His paranoia had kept him alive for years, but paranoia fails when the threat is one you can't imagine. He felt a chill on his neck. He turned. She was there, not panting, not frantic, simply present, as if the stone itself had given her shape. His hand darted toward a panic button. Hers was faster, covering his with gentle finality. "Don't," she whispered, "just one word. Enough." Dawn broke over the desert in strokes of fire and gold. At the gates of Fob Manticore, a dusty pickup rolled slowly to a stop. Soldiers gathered, exhausted, battered, eyes wide. They had seen helicopters return with wounded. They had heard whispers, but they hadn't expected this. The driver's door opened. Anna stepped out, calm, steady. She walked to the passenger side, pulled a man from the seat, hooded, hands bound, knees buckling in the dirt. Zaid al-Hamri, the ghost himself. The base erupted not in cheers but in stunned silence. She tossed a small data drive toward the nearest officer. "His network," she said flatly. then turned not toward the command center but toward the barracks, toward quiet. The sea of soldiers parted watching her go, watching a clerk who had done what legends couldn't. Colonel Thorne staggered into her path, his eyes hollow from the night, his pride broken. For a long moment he looked at her, and then, slowly, perfectly, he raised his hand in a salute, not the perfunctory gesture of rank to subordinate, but one warrior to another, a bow of humility. Anna's eyes met his. She gave the barest nod. Then she walked on, silent, as the desert wind carried the weight of everything unspoken. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Why had she chosen the shadows instead of the safety of extraction? The men she had saved could only stare after her, confusion written across their dust-streaked faces. Garrett, clutching his thigh, tried to lift himself, tried to protest, but the words died in his throat. She wasn't coming back. Not yet. The mission in her eyes still lived, and Anna Vyulov never left a mission unfinished. The cliffs rose ahead, jagged teeth gnawing at the sky. To most, they were impassable, an uncharted labyrinth of rock, scree, and hidden passageways. To Anna, they were familiar, almost intimate. She read them the way other people read maps, with instinct rather than measurement. Every crack, every shadow, every gust of wind was an ally if she used it correctly. In the TOC, all eyes remained glued to the blinking blue dot crawling up the mountain. Colonel Thorne muttered curses under his breath, too proud to admit he was witnessing something beyond his understanding. Captain Rostova leaned closer to her screen, her chest tight with a mix of fear and reluctant awe. The story of Kestrel was spreading through the room like wildfire, one whispered phrase after another. MIA, presumed dead, a legend walking again. Anna's dot paused, then vanished into a crevice. For a heartbeat the screen stilled. Men and women held their breath. Then the personal locator resumed, smaller movements now precise, surgical. She was inside. The bunker smelled of stone, damp and old, reinforced with steel where paranoia had shaped its bones. Voices murmured in Pashto down a corridor. Anna melted into an alcove, breath even, body still. Two guards passed, their footsteps echoing. They never saw her. Her hands never even tightened on her weapon. They weren't her targets. Not yet. Sensors blinked red in the dark, laser threads and motion eyes watching like sentinels. She moved with patience, climbing above, using pipes and beams as if her body were weightless. Each movement had the grace of ritual. She wasn't breaking in. She was flowing through veins in the fortress that had never been meant to carry human blood. She was the ghost, and ghosts did not trip alarms. At last she reached the nerve center, a reinforced door, a keypad glowing faintly. Through the narrow mesh window she saw three men inside, eyes fixed on glowing monitors, fingers clicking across keyboards. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. She didn't fire, she didn't knock. From her belt she drew a canister no larger than her palm and fitted it to a vent. A hiss. Silent, invisible. A minute later the men slumped forward, heads striking metal with dull thuds. The monitors flickered on, unattended. She entered, clean, silent, one movement to pocket a hard drive, another to switch her attention to the deeper corridors where she knew the ghost waited. She left the operators alive. They weren't her war. Her war was with the man who believed himself untouchable. Zaid al-Hamri, the ghost. He sat in his carved chamber, sipping tea from a delicate cup, carpets soft beneath his feet. His screen streamed the world beyond, news anchors, financial markets, chaos he had fueled and controlled. He leaned back, satisfied. His trap had sprung. The Americans had bled. He was safe, secure, invisible. But paranoia is a double-edged sword. It sharpens instincts yet dulls imagination. He had never imagined her. The faintest sound, a boot pressing into carpet. His neck prickled. He turned, slowly, disbelieving. She stood there, calm, composed, not a bead of sweat on her brow. Her rifle hung low, her expression unreadable, her presence undeniable. It was as if she had always belonged to this room, waiting in its silence. His hand darted toward the panic button. Her hand, faster, covered his gently. "Don't," she said, One word, cold, final, he froze. Back at the base, dawn began painting the desert sky in strokes of gold and ash. A shout went up in the TOC, Rostova leaning over her console, voice tight with awe. "Sir, movement. She's coming back." A vehicle icon appeared again, crawling toward the fob. Soldiers poured from their barracks, pulled by instinct, by rumor, by something heavier than orders. They gathered at the gate as the pickup rolled to a stop, dust curling around it like smoke from a pyre. Anna stepped out first, calm, unhurried, her face unreadable. Then she opened the passenger door and pulled a man out, hooded, bound, stumbling into the dirt. Zaid al-Hamri, the ghost, the target of months of planning, captured by a woman the colonel had tried to send away. The base fell silent, not a cheer, not yet, just stunned stillness. She tossed a small drive to an officer nearby. "His network," she said flatly, then turned, walking toward the barracks as if nothing had happened. Soldiers parted for her, eyes wide, silent, a path carved by awe. Colonel Thorne emerged, his face gray with exhaustion and shame. He blocked her way, staring at the woman he had dismissed. His jaw worked, his pride fractured. And then slowly he raised his hand in salute, not regulation, not perfunctory, pure. A soldier to another soldier, a man bowing before a truth he could not deny. Anna met his eyes for only a heartbeat, then gave a small nod and walked past him, her silence louder than any words. That night, under the weak glow of a motor pool light, Anna sat alone. Her rifle lay disassembled on a cloth. She cleaned it piece by piece, slow and methodical. Each click, each swipe of oil was a ritual, a way to wash the blood and chaos from her hands, to restore order in a world that demanded none. She didn't celebrate. She didn't mourn. She simply worked. Captain Rostova approached, hesitant, a slate in hand. "Warrant Officer Vyulov," she began, her voice softer than before. "The colonel asked me to give you this. Transfer orders, signed by him personally. You can choose your post, anywhere." Anna looked up briefly, her dark eyes unreadable. Then she glanced down at the rifle in her hands, the pieces fitting back into place like parts of herself. The Pentagon, a classroom, polished floors, commendations. None of it mattered. None of it fit. "There's a convoy moving north next week," she said instead, voice calm, low. "Green troops, they'll need oversight." Her hand slid the bolt into the receiver, smooth and final. Rostova stared, realization dawning. After everything, after proving she was more than legend, Anna Vyulov was choosing obscurity again. Not glory, not recognition, just the next necessary task. The captain set the slate aside. "The post is yours, ma'am," she whispered, and in that quiet "ma'am" lived a respect that outranked everything else. Anna stood at last, rifle whole, gaze lifted to the mountains silhouetted against the fading twilight. She was a guardian, silent, unseen. The world had tried to bury her in clerical errors, but the truth had bled through anyway. Her worth had never been in words or in ranks or in medals. Her worth was in action, and action never needed applause. Sometimes the most powerful answer to doubt is silence. Sometimes dignity doesn't announce itself. It simply endures. Why hadn't she chosen the safety of recognition, the comfort of reassignment? Most soldiers, after pulling 12 men from the jaws of death and dragging a ghost of terror back in chains, would have cashed in their due. But Anna Vyulov refused the spotlight. She chose instead what no one expected, the shadows again, the convoy north. A mission so mundane, so easily overlooked, that no officer above captain would bother to remember it. But Anna understood. Danger lived in the forgotten places. The desert night was cool, whispering with wind that carried secrets across the wire fences of the base. In the motor pool, under the thin halo of a worklight, she read through the convoy manifest. Fuel, food, medical supplies. Escort detail. A handful of young soldiers, barely seasoned, their boots not yet broken in. They didn't know it, but they were about to become targets. Militia activity had been spiking, the kind of ambushes that gutted green units. Anna saw it as clearly as she had seen the funnel in the mountains. Patterns spoke to her, and this one screamed. Captain Rostova appeared, slate in hand, her steps tentative. The deference was new. "The colonel asked me to confirm your orders," she said softly. "This isn't what you're choosing, it is what's expected." Anna didn't look up from the manifest. "What's expected doesn't win wars." Her voice was flat, unadorned. She tapped the sheet. "These supplies keep the men alive. The convoy fails and everything fails." Rostova studied her, the weight of the unspoken hanging in the air. This wasn't about fuel or rations. It was about something deeper. Anna wasn't chasing glory, she was chasing necessity. The captain finally nodded. "Then it's yours." And with that she turned, leaving Anna alone with the quiet hum of a base that had no idea what it owed her. The convoy rolled out at dawn. 8 vehicles in a staggered line. Cargo trucks in the middle, armored escorts at the edges. Dust plumed behind them, curling into the sky like a trail for anyone watching from the hills. The soldiers joked nervously on the radios, their laughter too loud, too forced. It was the laughter of men trying not to taste fear. Anna drove the lead civilian truck, her eyes scanning the terrain with Predator's calm. The land stretched wide and empty, but Anna felt it, pressure, invisible hands tightening around the column. She learned long ago that ambush wasn't about sight, it was about silence. The world went quiet when violence was near. Birds vanished. The wind stilled. The desert held its breath. "Eyes up," she said softly into the net. The chatter died. Her voice carried weight now. Even the greenest among them obeyed. And then it came. The crack of a rifle, the scream of a bullet tearing past. Shouts erupted, chaos blooming. RPG smoke streaked from a ridge, slamming into the rearmost truck. Fire and dust swallowed it whole. The convoy froze. But Anna did not. "Keep moving," she ordered, her voice sharp as steel. "Do not stop, push through." Panic wanted to root them in place, but her command cut deeper than fear. Engines roared. The convoy lurched forward. Anna's hands were steady on the wheel, her eyes locked on the ridge. She saw figures moving, shadows with rifles. She slammed the brakes, the truck skidding sideways, forming a barrier for the convoy behind her. In one motion she was out, rifle up, scanning, firing. Each shot precise, patient. One man fell. Another. She wasn't fighting to kill, she was fighting to buy time, to keep the convoy alive. The soldiers behind her, green and trembling, found courage in her stillness. They rallied, laying down fire, their panic hardening into survival. The convoy moved, wounded but intact, vehicles roaring past her position. She stayed where she was, last out, always last out. When the echoes faded, the ridge lay silent. Smoke drifted upward in thin columns. Anna returned to her truck, slid behind the wheel, and drove on as if nothing had happened. The convoy's radios filled with ragged thanks, voices breaking with adrenaline and relief. She answered none of them. By the time they returned to base, the men looked at her differently. They had seen death in the hills. They had seen her pull them through it without hesitation. She parked the truck, stepped out, and walked away, her silence heavier than any speech. In the TOC, reports flooded in. Rostova read them, her lips pressed tight. Thorne listened in silence, his pride no longer loud. He knew what was happening. Anna Vyulov, the woman he had once ordered taken off the mission, was rewriting the very measure of what a soldier could be. And she was doing it without ever asking for his approval. That night in the motor pool, Anna sat again under the pale light. Her rifle lay in pieces, her hands moving through the ritual of cleaning. Each pass of the cloth was deliberate. Each click of a part seating into place was final. The noise of the base faded into the distance. All that remained was her breath, the metal, the silence. She wasn't thinking of medals. She wasn't thinking of legends. She was thinking of the convoy she'd kept alive. The men who would write home tonight. The supplies that would reach the front. Small victories, quiet ones. The kind that never make headlines but keep the world from collapsing. In the shadows, she had found her place. And she would stay there unseen until the next necessary act called her forward. Because for Anna Vyulov, the mission was never about glory. It was about dignity. And dignity never shouts, it simply acts. Why did the whispers follow her now when she wanted only silence? She had chosen obscurity, but the men she had saved carried her name on their tongues. In the chow hall, in the barracks, in the radio calls home, they spoke of her. Not the colonel, not the mission plan, but Anna Vyulov, the ghost who had appeared from nowhere and dragged them out of hell. Stories grow quickly in places where fear runs deep, and her legend, though unwanted, was spreading. She ignored it. She kept to her corner of the motor pool, her cot in the transient barracks, her quiet meals at tables no one joined. To her, recognition was a distraction, a weakness that dulled instincts, but still she felt their eyes. Soldiers who had once overlooked her now turned their heads as she passed. Respect was written in their silence, and in that silence she felt a weight she did not want. She had not come here to be seen. She had come here to work. Captain Rostova found her one evening with a box of inventory reports in her hands. "They're digging," she said quietly, eyes scanning the dim-lit motor pool. "Your file, your past. They'll keep asking until someone answers." Anna didn't look up from the rifle she was reassembling. Let them. The click of metal sliding home was the only punctuation. Rostova hesitated. "You saved men the colonel couldn't. You finished a mission that was already lost. You can't expect this base to forget." Anna's hand stilled just for a heartbeat. Then she resumed her work. "Forgetting is the only gift I asked for." Her voice was soft, carrying a tired finality that Rostova could not break. But the questions didn't stop. Garrett, still on crutches, limped to the motor pool days later, his pride broken but his gratitude fierce. He leaned on the frame of the open bay, watching her clean her weapon. "You should have left us," he said bluntly. "No one would have blamed you. You could have gone home and no one would have ever known." Anna didn't answer. She slid the bolt forward, checked the chamber, set the rifle aside. Only then did she look at him. "You were mine," she said. "Not boast, not claim, just fact. I don't leave what's mine behind." Garrett nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling into him. He wanted to ask who she really was, what she really had been, but the look in her eyes silenced him. Some truths were too heavy to name. He turned and limped away, carrying the burden of awe. In the TOC, Colonel Thorne's frustration deepened. The more her silence grew, the more it gnawed at him. He reviewed after-action reports, interrogated survivors, listened to whispers. Each trail led to the same truth: she had done what his best could not. His pride fought it, resisted it, but in the hollow hours of night he felt something else: respect. And that respect frightened him more than his anger. Rostova noticed. She caught him once staring at the map where her transponder dot had crawled into the mountains, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. "She's still just a warrant officer," he muttered, but the words sounded brittle even to him. The convoy Anna had guarded reached its destination intact, supplies delivered, men unbroken, reports filed. To higher command it was routine. To the ones who had ridden in her shadow it was survival. They knew they owed it to her, and in the barracks their stories grew louder. Some called her cursed, others called her chosen, most simply called her Kestrel, though they couldn't say why. The name carried in whispers, picked up like desert wind. By the time it reached the colonel's ears, even he didn't dismiss it. Legends, he knew, had a way of taking root whether one wanted them or not. That night Anna sat alone again, her rifle disassembled before her. The ritual was unchanged, but her mind was restless. She thought of the faces of the men she had saved, of the convoy she had shielded, of the base where silence no longer protected her. She thought of the past she had buried and how easily the sand had shifted to reveal its bones. Her fingers paused on the cloth, pressing against the cold steel. A memory flickered mountains far away, voices calling her Kestrel, the sharp crack of gunfire in a valley where she had been left for dead. She had asked the army for one thing when she returned: to disappear. To be a name on a ledger, a body shuffled between posts, forgotten. And yet here she was again, pulled back into the light she hated. She closed her eyes. The desert hummed outside, steady, eternal. She knew what would come: new missions, new traps, new eyes following her every move. The cycle she had tried to escape was tightening again, and she wondered how long before silence could no longer hold. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes, even when you run to the shadows, the light finds you. Why hadn't higher command left her buried in the silence she had asked for? The answer came the morning the helicopter thundered down onto Fob Manticore's pad, scattering dust across the tents. Men and women squinted against the rotor wash as three officers in pressed uniforms stepped out. Not base regulars, not Thorne's staff. Washington. Their presence changed the air. Rumors already swirled before they reached the TOC. Anna knew before they said it. She sat in the motor pool, cleaning carbon from her rifle bolt, her hands steady, her heart steady. But she knew. Shadows don't last when the sun comes searching. Inside the TOC, Colonel Thorne stood stiff at attention. The lead officer, a brigadier general with pale, cutting eyes, didn't bother with pleasantries. "We've reviewed the reports," he said. "The operation failed. Alpha was compromised, but your warrant officer," his gaze flicked down at the file in his hand. "Vyulov, she not only recovered survivors, she secured the target himself. Alone." Thorne's jaw clenched, pride and humiliation fought in his chest. "She acted outside of orders," he said tightly, "without authorization." The general ignored him. "Where is she?" Rostova's eyes darted toward the motor pool camera feed, then back to Thorne. Her silence was answer enough. They found Anna exactly where they expected. Alone, methodical, her weapon laid in pieces. She didn't stand when they entered, didn't salute. She simply kept working as if their presence mattered no more than the wind. "Warrant Officer Vyulov," the general said, his voice like stone. "Or should I say Kestrel?" The name echoed off the walls. The mechanics working at the far bay stopped moving, tools suspended midair. The word carried weight they didn't understand. Anna's hand paused just briefly on the cloth. Then she resumed, wiping the bolt face. "That name is dead." "Not anymore," the general replied. He placed a folder on the workbench, sliding it toward her. Classified seals. Photographs of bunkers, compounds, faces circled in red. "We want you back where you belong. Special operations. Full reinstatement." Anna didn't even look at the folder. She fitted the bolt into the carrier, the click echoing sharp in the silence. "I belong here." The general's eyes narrowed. "You belong where you're needed, and right now your country needs you." Thorne watched the exchange from the edge of the bay, shame written deep into his lines. He had dismissed her. Now command wanted to elevate her. His authority hung hollow in the air. Rostova stood beside him, silent, her eyes flicking between the officers and Anna. She had never admired anyone the way she admired the woman sitting before her. But she also feared what came next. Anna finally lifted her gaze from the weapon. Her eyes were steady, unblinking. "You don't need me. You need a myth, and myths eat people alive." Her voice was flat, calm, but beneath it lay a sorrow no one else in that bay could name. The general said nothing for a moment. Then, "The choice is yours, but if you refuse, understand your silence won't hold. Files can be unsealed, stories can spread, and you will no longer be forgotten." Anna looked down again, pressing a pin into place. She knew he was right. The shadows she had chosen were already slipping away. The whispers had grown too loud, the legend too tempting. She could not kill it with denial. The officers left, leaving the folder behind. Thorne lingered a moment longer, his pride softening into something almost human. "I was wrong," he said, voice gravel. "Not loud, not for others, just for her. Whatever you decide, I'll back it." He turned and walked away, his salute days earlier still hanging between them like a truce neither could speak aloud. That night Anna sat under the same dim light, the folder unopened beside her. The desert wind slipped through the motor pool, carrying dust across the floor. She stared at the shadows of the mountains beyond the wire. Old ghosts lived out there, memories she had buried under layers of duty and silence. They were awake again now, clawing back to the surface. She picked up the folder at last, her hands steady though her chest was not. She flipped it open, letting the photograph spill like truths too long hidden. A face she recognized. A location that smelled of blood and smoke. They wanted her back in the fire. They wanted Kestrel. But Anna Vyulov was not sure Kestrel still existed. And if she did, whether bringing her back would save lives or destroy what little remained of the woman she had become. Sometimes survival isn't about what you endure. Sometimes it's about what you refuse to return to. Why was she still resisting when everyone else around her had already begun to believe? That was the question echoing through the base as days stretched on. The convoy ambush she had broken, the ghost she had delivered, the men she had saved. To the soldiers of Manticore, there was no debate anymore. Kestrel had returned. But to Anna, the name felt like a wound, and wounds, when pulled open, bleed. The general's folder remained on her cot. She hadn't touched it since that night. The photographs inside, faces circled in red, compounds etched on satellite stills, pulled at her like voices from a grave. Each image wasn't just an enemy. It was a memory. It was the life she had buried under silence. A life she feared would swallow her again if she let it. Rostova saw the conflict in her. She came quietly one evening, her boots crunching the gravel outside the motor pool. "They're not going to let this go," she said, her voice low. "Command knows. The men know. Even the colonel knows. You can't keep pretending you're just logistics." Anna didn't answer. She tightened a strap on her plate carrier, methodical, precise. Her silence was armor, but Rostova pressed anyway. "You think staying invisible protects you. Maybe it does, but it doesn't protect them. And you know it." For the first time in days, Anna looked up. Her eyes were dark, unblinking, a storm without thunder. "You don't know what it costs to be what they want." Her words were quiet, but they shook Rostova all the same. 2 nights later, the desert tested her resolve. A call came across the net. A supply patrol ambushed on the road east, pinned in a canyon cut. Too far for the QRF, too close for hesitation. Thorne ordered the response, his voice tight, every eye flicking toward the motor pool, toward her. Anna was already moving. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't ask. She checked her rifle, her sidearm, her pack, and slid into the same stripped-down pickup she had used to drive into the mountains. No headlights, no convoy, just one woman, the same way it had been before. But this time the base knew. Men watched her go, whispers rising like prayer. Kestrel. The name followed her into the dark. The canyon was a wound in the earth, echoing with the rattle of gunfire. Flares hissed overhead, painting the rocks in flashes of red and white. Anna crawled up the ridge, each step silent, her body pressed low against the stone. Below she saw them, young soldiers crouched behind their trucks, terrified, firing blindly. Above them, militia rifles sparked in the dark, their positions elevated, their trap perfect. Anna moved without hesitation, a shadow among shadows. One rifle fell silent, then another, then another. Each suppressed thump was like a heartbeat, steady, inevitable. By the time the militia realized they were being hunted, half their line had already collapsed. Confusion spread, fear rippling through men who had believed they owned the night. And in that confusion, the patrol broke free. Engines roared, trucks lurched forward, the canyon echoing with retreat instead of death. When the last soldier stumbled back toward safety, wide-eyed and alive, Anna remained on the ridge. She didn't wave. She didn't call. She simply vanished into the stone, the canyon swallowing her whole. At the base, the survivors spoke of her in tones caught between fear and awe. They hadn't seen her arrive. They hadn't heard her move. They only knew that death had stalked them, and then death itself had been stalked. "She's not like us," one whispered. "She's something else." The colonel heard it, the general heard it, Rostova heard it, and Anna heard it too as the whispers chased her back into the motor pool. She sat again beneath the dim light, disassembling her weapon, the motions mechanical. But her hands trembled now, not from fear, from the weight of inevitability. The shadows she had lived in were gone. She had been seen too many times in too many moments by too many men who would not forget. Kestrel was no longer a name in a sealed file. She was flesh and blood again, breathing, fighting, saving, alive. And that truth was a cage as much as it was a calling. Anna closed her eyes, pressing her palms against the cool steel of her weapon. She had wanted to disappear. She had wanted to be forgotten. But war never forgets those who can bend it, and somewhere deep inside she knew this was only the beginning. Sometimes you don't choose the legend. Sometimes the legend chooses you. Why had she carried the folder this long if she had no intention of opening it again? It lay on her cot like a shadow, silent but heavy, a reminder of what waited beyond the wire. Every day she walked past it. Every night she avoided its pull. And yet, Anna knew. The choice wasn't about whether she would return. The choice was whether she could deny what she already was. The whispers had become a roar. Men called her Kestrel without hesitation now, as if the name had always belonged. They spoke of her not as a clerk, not as a fluke, but as a constant. The canyon rescue had sealed it. Her myth was no longer myth. It was flesh. It was her. And even though she never asked for it, it clung to her like dust that could not be washed away. Colonel Thorne came to her one evening alone, his posture stripped of bluster. He leaned against the doorframe of the motor pool, his voice rough. "I misjudged you. I won't make that mistake again." He paused, the silence between them filled with the rattle of tools, the scrape of cloth on steel. "The men believe in you. Hell, they need you. I don't have to like it to see it." Anna didn't answer. She finished fitting a pin, the click echoing in the dim space. But she saw him watching her with something new, not anger, not fear, acceptance, and for the first time, perhaps even respect. When the next mission came down, a deep insertion, a target buried in a network of caves, command wanted her at the center. She didn't protest. She didn't accept with fanfare either. She simply stood, checked her rifle, and moved toward the waiting bird. The men gathered on the tarmac watched her climb aboard, their eyes lit with something rare in war. Trust. They believed in her silence more than they had ever believed in orders. As the helicopter rose, the desert stretched out beneath her, endless, harsh, unforgiving. She felt the old rhythm pulse in her veins. Every sound, every shadow, every heartbeat belonged to her again. Kestrel was not dead. She had only been waiting. But Anna knew the truth. Legends are double-edged. They save men, but they cut the bearer. She had been broken once under the weight of expectation, of missions that demanded too much from flesh and bone. She felt that burden returning now, heavier than ever. And yet she carried it, because someone had to, because silence was not escape, it was endurance. She would go where others couldn't. She would walk into the dark so others could walk out. And when they asked her name, she would not answer. The name would echo without her voice. It would live without her permission. It would outlast her. Kestrel. Back at the base, soldiers would wait for her return. Some would whisper prayers. Some would whisper stories. All would know that somewhere in the night, Anna Vulov moved with the steady patience of a shadow, protecting, watching, acting. And when her rifle clicked back together under the dim light, when the dust of the day settled into the silence of the desert, she would remember the one truth that guided her more than any order or rank. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.